Forgive me for any DP issues in this 10 minutes with Nick. Does violence beget violence? I think we all know the answer to that, but I'm going to talk about it anyway. Hi, I'm Nick. This is 10 minutes with Nick, and I got to tell you, the last couple of weeks have been nothing but violence in the air and in the news and in the airwaves. Whether it's just bloody hell, it's violent. Statistically speaking, of course, your local municipality will likely tell you that crime has never been lower. Also, crime has never been more valuable to social media companies, to corporations, everybody you want to name. Violence is a profitable game. Surprisingly enough, I think violence is probably least profitable to gun manufacturers. It's least profitable because it's not a good look for their products to be used in violence against civilians. Weapons manufacturers is a different story. They sell weapons of war. You know, we got big problems with Northrop Grumman and Raytheon and all them folks. But what do I mean when I say violence begets violence? Well, we talked about this on the last 10 minutes with Nick, the Charlie Kirk assassination. We talked about that at length. I'm not going to get back into it here. But that same day as the Charlie Kirk shooting, we had another school shooting. Schools are the constant target of violence, and they're not being targeted typically. They're typically not being targeted by very old people. It's not the boomers or the Gen Xers who are, it's not the boomers or the Gen Xers who are typically enacting these horrible acts of violence. No, it's typically millennials, Gen Z, and I just saw a case on X, Twitter, whatever you want to call it today, of two young kids. I don't know how recent the story was, but I don't really care how recent the story was. It was two 8th graders who were thankfully arrested before they could do anything, but when they were arrested after they were studying Columbine on the internet and were making a map of the school. Just disturbing. So violence begets violence, but why does it do that? Well, I think the easy answer is, once again, if we look at our social media. What is the most popular thing on social media? What gets you the most views? What gets you the most likes? What gets you the most clout? Let's take the best case scenario of what gets you the most clout. Let's take that just sort of best case scenario. Excuse me, my trash is open. What in the best case scenario gets you the most clout? Well, violence. And usually fairly low stakes violence, like stupid stuff like throwing a tennis ball at your buddy's nuts. Like stupid, that's violence. It's violence, but it's stupid violence. But then you look at something like a school shooting. Typically speaking, we can't help ourselves. The shooter gets plastered all over the media and becomes this sort of pop culture icon. And to be clear, I'm using icon in just the context of something that is widely known, right? Icon is not a moral judgment on something. Michael Jackson was a great pop culture icon for his music, not so much for what he did later on. But for his music, he was a pop culture icon. Same thing with Michael Jordan, pop culture icon. These school shooters become that in their own way, and it's frightening. It's frightening because, well, any lonely kid who is trying to find some meaning in the world will cling to anything that just might give them meaning. Just maybe, just might will give them the meaning they're seeking in their life, the broader whatever they're seeking. And usually when you're lonely and you're cornered and you're afraid, you're not seeking like, oh my God, you're not seeking, you don't necessarily want to be everybody's friend. Everybody's bullied you. You don't want to be friends with your bullies. But you want them to know who you are. You want them to know who you are. And suddenly you start studying some of these mass shooting events. And you go, hey, everybody knows who that guy is. This is not going on my Instagram anyway, so I can say this without fear. It's the same thing that I think about some of these trans issues, right? Absolutely, trans people exist, and they have a right to exist. But I think when we're talking to kids about trans issues, talking to kids about those issues preys on a vulnerable group of individuals who, at many points in their lives, in many seasons of their life, are just lonely and looking for a sense of notoriety or belonging or whatever. And I know I just said nobody's really looking for notoriety, but when I say notoriety here, what I mean is belonging or importance. And it's interesting, the correlation between these two. It is not causation. Let me be clear. This is not a causation argument. This is simply a correlation argument and a helpful illustration as to why we see violence beget violence. It's the same effect as how we're suddenly seeing all of these kids who are suddenly identifying as they, them, or XX17Y buzzword, whatever. Or, becoming a furry at the age of 14. Because you know what happens when you become a furry at the age of 14? The furry community embraces you. They welcome you. Now, a group and a community welcoming you is not inherently itself a bad thing, but it is the people who got them introduced into that culture. That is a bad thing. That is preying on emotionally lonely kids. Now, when you get to be 18, join whatever weird clique you want. Become the anime club, whatever, right? But when we discuss issues like trans identity with youth in particular, and in particular, the way it's done on social media, where it's lionized, where, oh my God, look, I thought I was lonely, or I thought there was a problem with me. Turns out I was just built wrong. I just needed to express myself differently. And all of a sudden they start to express themselves differently, and all of a sudden they start to get those comments. They start to get that clout. They start to get those likes. That's a dopamine release. That triggers something in kids. And when and if that's not enough, what do they do then? Or what happens when they get 10 years down the road and they realize, I didn't want that? That's the illustration here. Because there are groups that, like trans groups, reach into this group of kids, but they're not talking about gender ideology. They're talking about violent ideology. And they reach into these groups of kids to radicalize them because they can. Because kids are vulnerable. Because kids have always been vulnerable. They've never not been vulnerable. There's a reason we've never in human history allowed kids to consent to a whole range of things. Because kids can be distracted by anything that sounds good. Because they're kids. They haven't developed yet. But when you have lonely kids, it leads to these sorts of things. And again, I'm not connecting trans ideology and school shooters. What I'm saying is it's the same model that leads a kid to jump into the queer community as it leads a kid to jump into violent communities. It's a sense of belonging and community. Because guess what? No kid wakes up at the age of 13 and says, I want to kill somebody today. No kid is that violent. But I can tell you there are people who tell them that, hey, do you want to be remembered forever? Do it. Steal your dad's gun. Go into school. Take back the power that was stolen from you. And when you die for this cause, you'll be remembered forever. It's horrific. It's sad. I don't know how we stop it in the age of the internet. I really don't. Again, this is something that we have to consider, especially when all these ideologies are able to get foisted on kids at young ages. I don't know. Those are my thoughts. This is an episode that I obviously can't put up on Instagram because I would get flamed for it by people I know, and I would rather they have to come find it to flame me for it, since I just, in this episode, without meaning to, probably accidentally made it sound like trans ideologies and shooter ideologies overlap. Oof, I'm going to get in trouble for that one. But it's my opinion, and I'm standing by it. Rules of 10 minutes with Nick. I speak. I don't really edit. I just put them together, and I put it on the internet. Those are my rules. It's what I do. It's my podcast. Live with it. In the meantime, enjoy. Have a good weekend. I'm Nick. This is 10 Minutes with Nick. Have a great day.